Okay, today on the Income Flip podcast, I've got Lindsay Davis from Birmingham, Alabama. Lindsay, welcome to the Income Flip podcast.
Thank you so much for having me on. I'm excited to be here.
So I was giving you a little behind the scenes of how we play the game, right? But I want to learn how you play the game. I want to learn about your business, but more importantly, I want to learn about you, like your story as the real estate entrepreneur. Like, how did you get started?
Yeah, so like you said, CEO of Spartan Invest and Atlas Rental Property, and so we're a full service turnkey company, but we didn't start that way. And kind of my journey and how we got to where we are right now is we started flipping. I started my career. I'll go from the beginning. So I
Let's do
started
it.
I started my career in corporate America. And in a terrible time in 2008, 9. And so me and my business partner, we were seeing some of these properties go into foreclosure and had someone that was flipping properties in Montgomery and reached out and said, hey, you want to test it out in Tuscaloosa, Alabama, is where we were both living post graduation from UA. And we're like, yeah, sure, we'll try it. Did a couple of purchases, did flips. I mean, the market is nowhere near where it is today, so we weren't making a ton of money, but still the margins were very desirable. Both in our 20s, not married, no kids yet. So we said, hey, why not? Let's take a shot at it. Decided to leave our corporate cushy jobs with health insurance and retirement plan to do a toe dip into the real estate world. Quickly realized that Birmingham, Alabama was where we needed to be, so we moved our office to downtown Birmingham. Had to actually renovate our office ourselves. We got our parents to come and help as well and bought them fast food lunch to help pay for their quote services and helping us paint this house built 130 years ago. That was the only thing that we could afford for an office. And started really just more focusing on your HGTV flips, your everything. We were kind of doing the high end and your A plus areas, and it was going well. And the properties that we were selling, they were profitable. It is a grind. It's much more of a grind than kind of the buy and hold strategy, but that was our model at the time. And like I said, the market just wasn't as good as it is today, and properties were sitting for on average 45 to 65 days. That was pretty normal. There were a lot more concessions given. And so in the times when it was a little bit slower in your winter months and holidays where you see real estate tend to die down a little bit, I mean, we weren't getting paid. If you're starting a business and you're relying on the closing of properties, you don't make any money. So kind of in a panic, like, okay, well, how do we weather this? We went and purchased several just single family homes from foreclosure. We didn't do a ton of renovation to those starter homes, but started managing them as well while still doing the flips. And that's really when kind of the light bulb went on for us, in that we saw the value of the rental property, the rental income that we were getting from those properties. It was helping pay the vast majority of our overhead and ensuring that we had paychecks. And that was just huge. And so that's for us, it was like, hey, this is the value that we see. We are just happen to be in an ideal market. And I can dive into why Alabama and Tennessee and Georgia are ideal markets in a minute. But we were just already set up perfectly, where the returns were phenomenal, the cash flow was great. And that's where we saw the true value in our ability to contribute and invest in real estate. So we completely stopped flipping houses, went hardcore in 2013 to the turnkey model. Since then, we sell on average about 250 to 300 single family homes a year. And we have the management company as well that's in our family of companies, Atlas Rental Property, that will continue to manage the home afterwards. And we are managing roughly 2,200 doors right now in those 3 states. And we also started a new construction company in 2020, focusing on offering a BTR to our clients as well. We do some owner occupant new construction, but it's primarily for the the BTR, the build to rent model for our clients. So that's kind of how Spartan Invest kind of came to be.
I love that. I love that. That we've got a lot to talk about because it's interesting. What I didn't tell you in the beginning when we started full time as investors was we looked at our market here in Northern Virginia and asset values were super high. The rent to purchase ratio was way off. So we started looking at submarkets, right? And, we looked at, we looked at St. Louis. We looked at a lot of different markets. My wife's from St. Louis. I said, well, a couple of hours away from where we live, it's like 2.5 hours, there's this town where you could buy a duplex for $50,000 and each side rents for like $550 a month. And those numbers looked a lot better than the numbers I was looking at here in the Northern Virginia area, which might be the time a townhouse might be 350 and the rent might be like 1,500, right? Like the spread was so off. And so we went to this submarket and I soon realized, well, I need a lot of these rentals to pay for my life. Kind of like what you were saying, right? Like I need a lot of these to pay for my life. So I turned to this turnkey model where we would buy duplexes, triplexes, quads, renovate them and sell them to investors turnkey. And then we would manage those properties for those investors turnkey. And that became a model for us to kind of make money on. Problem was, listen, so this is where my question's coming. The problem was that market, we soon learned that it was just brutal to try to make it work for not only ourselves, but our investors because the churn was so high. It was like lower income. There was no growth in that market. There weren't any job prospects of like companies coming into that job market. And in fact, today, that same duplex that I bought for $50,000 15, 17 years ago is still $50,000,
Wow.
right? And so we pivoted out of that market like around 2010, right? 2009, 2010. But it was my education into the game, right? Of like, oh,
Hmm.
I got to raise some money and I market, I buy these properties, I sell them to investors, we manage the assets. So it was awesome. But it sounds like Birmingham right off the bat that the numbers and the cash flow worked for you, right? Where you were like, oh shoot, this is actually making us money and it's stable. Tell me a little
Right.
bit about that. Like why, like yeah, I'm curious about that. What do the numbers look like then? Give me
Well,
an example.
so, to be honest, obviously the numbers look a lot different than they did when we first started this in 2013. The average cash flow and rate of return, but what we see right now when we're selling properties to our investors, and a lot of our investors are just like you in that they live in markets where it just does not make fiscal sense to purchase a rental property in that particular area. You're going to be negative cash flow, you're going to be underwater. So like Southern California, New York, Colorado, like that's
Yeah,
where
DC. Yep.
yeah,
Yep.
absolutely. Like that's where our clients are, where it just does not make sense. And so they're looking at our properties with an average purchase price of about 165,000 with a average return of anywhere between 9.5 to 10.5%. Now that's financed. So if you were to take out a 30-year note, we do also offer a forward commitment so you're able to lock in at a 5.5% interest rate. And the forward commitment is just, hey, that's just the rate buy down. That's what every new construction builder has been doing for decades. And so we're offering that as well since we saw quite a volatile swing on the interest rates back in 22 and 23. So that's something that our investors are seeing. Now, if they decide to come in and buy all cash, they're going to probably see around a 7.5% return over the first 2 to 3 years. But you bring up a really good point with markets in that you have to be very strategic when you're evaluating what markets to invest in, and that sometimes there are sub-markets within Alabama where we do not purchase and we're not going to buy because they fail to generate any type of appreciation, and that that the values of those properties are not going to increase given other circumstances. And
Hmm.
so we're primarily focused. If you look at Birmingham, we're in all of the surrounding submarkets of Birmingham, and I can go in a list. And if you want to know all about them, we've got them broken down into zip codes on our website. If you're just really bored on an airplane one day and you want to know why we buy in 35203, you can check that out. But we're primarily focused on the surrounding areas of Birmingham, and we love Alabama and Georgia and Tennessee for a few different reasons. And this is something that you have to take into consideration when you're looking at markets. You want population growth. That has got to be a given. You don't want it to be an area in which people are leaving. You want a landlord friendliness. And I should have said that one last because that's probably the most important. But you have got to target areas where the local and state government are going to support laws that will protect home ownership for the property owner. That is crucial, and that is why the Southeast has been very successful with rental properties, is because we do value the ability to retain your asset if you do come across a non-paying tenant or someone who is breaching the lease. And the third is that you need diverse an economy. So you need something where you're not strictly driven by, let's say, one like auto manufacturing. You look at Alabama, and we're probably one of the highest auto manufacturing states in the country. But we also our second largest state employer is University of Alabama in Birmingham, which is a research hospital. So it is a very, very diverse economy, and that's we've got data centers at the FBI. You've got Huntsville, the Rocket City. I said I already say Facebook. I can't. I've lost track of when I was rattling off all of the employers that are targeting Huntsville. And if you've read anything about the fastest growing cities, man, I got so tongue tied. I'm gonna just take a sip. Like I got so tongue tied just then, just trying to talk about Huntsville and everything like that. That's my fault.
I love it. I love it. You mentioned
I get
Tennessee.
very passionate about it because there's so much going on in the Huntsville market, and that's why I get excited, and then I start talking fast. Even though I have a very thick Southern accent, I can talk really
I
fast.
know. I love it. I could hear the passion, right?
But
And you mentioned Tennessee. I'm just selfishly, we have a little office in Knoxville, Tennessee. So what part of Tennessee are
so
you doing?
we have an office in Chattanooga, and that office services that Chattanooga and surrounding areas, but then it also services the North Georgia area and your Ringgold, Rossville, that type area, all the way kind of down into I think the lowest we go is Dalton.
Okay. 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 Let me take a step back real fast, and then we'll dive deeper into um the different submarkets. 2,200 properties that you manage. That's a lot.
Correct. It
That's a
is.
lot. Okay. This is like you bootstrapping this and your mom and dad, and you're like painting the place, right? Like, talk to me about that growth. Talk to me about those systems that you had to put in place. There's a lot of business owners in like listening to this, and people that are launching their business for the first time, right? Um, what advice will you give them as they're launching and building something that is scalable, which you've built a scalable business at this point. It's awesome.
Yeah, there is so much advice that I could say. I'll try to minimize it and not go off on a crazy tangent. But on the property management side, if you are looking to scale, a couple of things that you've got to take into consideration when you're growing any type of business would be your processes and your systems are your do or die, and that you've got to be able to generate your scope of work or your processes and able to follow them to a T, especially when you're looking at some of the federal regulations with property management. That was something that we realized very early on, is that we've got to be able to put ourselves in a position to protect our clients when it comes to any kind of issues. Property management can be a very litigious industry. So that was kind of one of the first things that we wanted to make sure we were checking all of the boxes there. So any kind of regulations, state, federal, please make sure that you know Always, because that's a great way to kill a startup business is to kind of get into some legal trouble. But I will say also that when you're looking at growing the companies, I, I can't stress enough to finding the people. And again, it's going to sound like I just read a leadership book, and they say, hey, you got to delegate, you've got to find your people. But that is probably one of the most important things when you're looking at your ability to grow. It's something that I had to learn the hard way. It's something that I have to encourage all of the leaders in the building to, hey, you've got to push this off. You've got to hand this off. You're not going to be able to focus on the big picture things if you are still in the weeds. When you are starting the company and you are in the weeds and you're doing all of the things from when I was a leasing agent. So I'm out there showing rentals to potential tenants and taking leasing calls, taking maintenance calls on the weekends, and dealing with dealing with a car that drove through one of our properties. And so you're dealing with all of that. So you've got all of that on your plate. And there's this mindset of like, well, I'm just going to be able, it's just going to be easier for me if I just do it. If I just knock it out and do it, it's going to be easier than trying to train somebody to do it, or they may not do it the way that I want them to do it. And while that can be true, you also have to be able to take a step back and relinquish the reins and tell them that like, hey, you're going to be able to do this, and if you need me, I'm here. And then you have to implement the trust but verify. But that's probably the biggest thing that a lot of entrepreneurs, or especially investors that are trying to grow their real estate portfolio and do it all themselves, is that, hey, you've got to get rid of all of the things, everything on your plate that is not moving the needle. You've got to get rid of. It was the best decision I ever made to hire my first executive assistant. It wasn't until like 2018 where I finally like ripped the band-aid. I was like, okay, I'm dying. I need somebody. And she changed my life in the best possible way. I was able to get reports and data given to me so I could know the high level numbers without doing all of the digging, and just somebody to help me with my inbox. And it was just a complete game changer. And I'm like, why have I not been doing this the entire time? And it's because, as I didn't want to relinquish that trust, and et cetera, et cetera. So I can't stress that enough. I think that
It's
that's probably the biggest pieces.
yeah, it's funny. As we build out multiple offices, I find that that is the hardest piece to teach other people how to do. Like I even started naming the dragons, right? I call that clutch, the drag. Like in the beginning, I'll tell you, like I have this whole mythology of like how the entrepreneur goes through the journey, right? It starts with like the dragon of doubt, right? Like, can you do this? Are you good enough to do this? Like, there's a lot of fear that's there, right? And then at level two, you've got to defeat. If you defeat that at level two, you have to defeat the dragon of distraction, right? Like everything looks like an opportunity. Everything looks like an opportunity, but you have to pick and you got to decide, just like you said, oh, hey, we're going to pick this thing and get really good at this thing, right? And then once you defeat the dragon of distraction, you start making a lot of money. You get really, really busy, and it starts affecting your household and your health because you haven't learned how to delegate. And like
Yeah.
you're working 100 hours a week, and the next problem arises, and that's the dragon of control, right? And I call that dragon clutch, and we got to slay clutch. And the way we slay clutch is by starting to think of yourself as a CEO and just delegating everything, right? You start realizing what your dollar per hour is. And it's the hardest thing because as an because I've thought about this deeply. As a producer, it took you a long time to figure out how to make money as a producer. And so you got comfortable in production.
Right.
And now when you start moving into leadership and business ownership, you're learning a whole nother skill. And I think it's really scary for a lot of people to let go of those things because they're
Absolutely.
leaving what's comfortable for the unknown all over again, right?
Hmm.
And you used the words. I said, listen, a great EA will change your life, right? And in our business also, we have a production partner. So production partner is kind of like the surrogate you in the field, right? And that production partner will change your life. And so um, I just want to double click on this. I remember when I was young and everybody would say, the difference in our business is our people. And I remember thinking that sounds so like airy fairy, right?
It
And
does.
then and then what happens is 20 years later you realize, oh no, the difference is the people,
The
right?
people.
The people. And if you can train and develop awesome people, right? Then that really skyrockets your business. Like you literally have to become, eventually you realize you're really a leadership development, talent acquisition business, right? And we're just fulfilling our, mission through this vehicle, right? Yours is managing properties, right, for investors and selling properties turnkey. And, ours is selling real estate, right, to investors. And
Hmm.
so, um, yeah, it's so cool. Like I love hearing it because I recognize that. The other area that you touched on that I see people flame out on, I don't know how you handled it, was the accounting piece, right? Property management, right? If you get behind on your accounting and property management, it could be a nightmare. Ask me how I know. It could be a nightmare, right? And it's been the demise of many property management companies who didn't set up the right systems or have the right CRM or right. Who taught you all that? Did you get a mentor? Did you get a coach?
So, not necessarily like our business model is pretty different in that when we were flipping properties to investors, I we were able to sit on our property management company and lose money for the first 4 years, and we just
Mm,
kind of knew that. And that on the property management side, it is the margins are very slim if that's what you're doing, right? If you're just receiving the income, it's completely different. But on the just the PM side, the margins are very small, and we were growing Atlas Rental Property as a service to those who purchase with Spartan Invest. And that so our goal is to be the white glove of the turn of investing in rental properties, and then we don't really want you to have to worry about anything. Like you said, it's not truly passive, because yes, you do still have to pay your mortgage, because we're not going to do that, and all of this. You still have to pay attention to your investment. I'm really glad that you said that too, because I think that's a really good point that gets glossed over. But if you're looking strictly at why we built the property management, it was really to service those who were purchasing and fulfilling kind of what our goal was, is to be the top end service where it can be as passive as possible. And so we were able to kind of sit and not make money on the property
mm,
management side for a long time. Now, we did reach out to, we worked with an advisor that had worked in property management before, and we had worked with him a few things, but it was mainly primarily on the processes and getting some of those, like, hey, how do you handle like the platform change for, because we've had software changes, what are some good ways to handle like through the eviction process, and what we saw too is that the rapid growth and what the processes were that we originally set up when we had 200 doors did not work when we got to 700, and that definitely didn't work when we got to 1200, and that didn't work when we got to 2000. So it's been just kind of that evolution. But when we did meet with an advisor in the very very early stages, and it wasn't necessarily surrounding the accounting, but you're right in that that can be something that is hard to grapple with. But again, it was we are a different setup, and that we knew that, hey, we're going to push this property management to the side. Like that's just not how we make money, especially in the
now,
first 5 to 6 years and stuff. So it was a little bit of a different setup.
yeah, well, I would always tell my wife, I was like, property management's like our lost leader, right? That's how I looked at it. I was like, these people are not going to buy these assets unless we're managing the assets for them, and we're gonna hold true to our word and take care of the asset and do all the rest. But then that asset became valuable, right? That property management became valuable. 200 units, I would imagine like that thing is really valuable, right?
Yes, absolutely.
And so
Now it is. Not back then, but yes,
that's right.
absolutely. Now with
Now,
the
now it
22.
is. Now, now it is. Um, and you guys are like you said, like I heard you say, you're selling somewhere between 250, 300 houses a year. Is that right?
Mm-hmm.
So
Yep.
you're finding these investments for your investors that you're probably meeting on podcasts like these or through bigger pockets or running investment groups or all that. And then and referral. I would imagine referral is probably a big one for you guys as well. Um,
And on how investors are finding us, yeah, through yeah, we've got podcasts, we've got an internal sales team, we sponsor conferences, real estate conferences, and meetups, and yeah, just through the your typical avenues.
yeah, no, that's awesome. So is Birmingham? I guess Birmingham's the main market, and it continues to be sound like it's a good market, right? But you have,
Mhm.
did you expand into these other markets like Georgia and Tennessee because you're like, okay, like those are the next growth markets. We're tapped out in Birmingham, right? Um,
Not necessarily the tapped out. What we found was that we could have kind of stayed in Birmingham, but we wanted the growth and we wanted to be able to grow and sell more properties, grow our property management company as well. And so we were targeting areas that met all of the criteria, right? The landlord friendliness, affordability, growth. And so those are the areas that we wanted to continue to grow and go into. But also, our investors wanted diversity, and that's why we also started new construction. Is that a majority of
mm,
our investors, they don't necessarily just want to have all of their eggs in a Birmingham basket, which I completely understand as well. So we have a lot of our investors who own multiple properties. They'll own one in Birmingham, one in Huntsville, and they'll buy a new construction home. And they're so they're not necessarily competing with themselves when a tenant vacates, and they're a little bit widespread in case something does happen to a local market or a
yeah, it's
local
great.
economy.
Yeah, they're diversifying through the product, right? And the location. That makes a lot of sense, right? And I'm glad you brought that up because one of the things that I learned when we were playing this game was these older houses, they need a lot of love, right? Some of
They
these
do.
properties, these properties that we bought like a long time ago, they need a lot of love. And and so I started seeing this trend of build to rent across the US. And it sounds like you guys caught that, right? Do
Hmm.
you have your, help me understand that model? Are you like, if I'm an investor and I'm like, Lindsay, find me a lot, build me a house, let's put a tenant in. Is that kind of like how it works? Or
No, not necessarily, and it's not. It works very similar to the turnkey process in that we have established the areas that we know will make good rental properties for new construction. So we've already established those, and we've already either bought lots or developed land that we are building on and selling and offering those to investors. Now, we do the BTR slightly different, and what happened and what a lot of institutional buyers have come in and done, or institutional investors have come in and done, is they've done these just massive developments, and everything in that development has been a rental property. And there's nothing wrong with that. There's been an inventory shortage. It is needed. Our approach is a little different in that we are only going to build new construction in areas where we could go one to two ways. We focus very much on our submarkets and getting a 60-40 owner occupant tenant split ratio. That's really important to us because we want to make sure that you do have a healthy pool of tenants when you go to lease that property, but you do want a section of home ownership to help elevate the overall like market
yeah,
appeal,
stabilize the market.
stabilize. Yes, absolutely. So we don't do full BTR neighborhoods. And so like one that we're doing right now in the south side of Birmingham, it is, we've got some on the rental market and then some on the owner occupant market. So we try to diversify a little bit like that. And our investors very much like that because of all of the benefits there, especially if you're in the same neighborhood. You want to be able to, if you have to vacate or if you have to exit quickly, you want to be in an area where you're able to sell that property to anyone and not just an investor. And that's a benefit of the new construction model that we do, and also of just the single family rental space in general. So it's like if you're buying quadplexes or multifamily, you have to exit, your pool of buyers is a little bit smaller.
Yeah, it's one of the reasons why I've always kind of liked that um 1 to 4 units, right? Only because I can pivot to a retail buyer uh and they buy on emotion. They
Yeah,
don't buy on the logic and numbers. And so I can create a spread there, right?
right.
So interesting. That's cool. That's cool. How many of those have you guys done so far?
New
ATRs.
construction, we have completed, oh my goodness, 240. I honestly, it's been a minute. I should know that number. I don't know that anybody's asked.
No, but that's great.
Been
Yeah.
about 240 new construction homes.
Yeah. Enough.
Turns out 2020 was a terrible year to start a new construction company. Wish I would have known, wish I had a crystal ball, but we had kind of hit the ground running at the beginning of 2020 and then everything shut down. So that year was kind of a loss for our new builds, but so from 21 now.
So from 2021 now, it must have been good, I would imagine, right?
We did one neighborhood. We just completed our first full neighborhood that we did both owner occupant and tenants in the Tuscaloosa area, and it was a 70 property development. And then we've done sporadic completions. We started with buying up the pad ready lots in already established neighborhoods as well and finishing those out. There were a lot of neighborhoods that just kind of got left after '07 and '08 with the first phase or maybe the second phase not fully complete. And so that was a way that we were able to buy a bunch of pad ready lots and get building quickly without having to worry with development.
That's awesome. So yeah, so you went from fixing and flipping to management to developer, right? Um, what's next? Like, what's the plan? What's the
Uh,
plan?
I would say next we want to spend more time and energy on our new construction product, and that what we found is uh, over the last 5 years with home prices being so high, and that the price difference. So like let's say our average renovated property is of 165,000, and but you see there's a lot of ours in the higher end markets like Chattanooga that sit in that 220, 230 range, and our new construction is anywhere from 280 to 300. So with that small of a price gap, our investors are opting for the new construction because they want the deferred maintenance. Now we're going in on our renovated properties. Like you said, they do need a lot of work, and we're doing a lot of work. I think our average renovation cost when we buy the house is right at $52,000. So we're
Mm.
putting in a lot of work on the front end for those properties, but it's still a house built in the 60s and the 70s, and it's going to have things that go wrong with it. So what's next is we want to focus a lot more on new construction moving forward, and then we also want to go into additional markets uh, in our current states. I think Alabama, we're good. We're in all of the markets that we want to be in, but we want to tap in more into Tennessee and into Georgia before we go into additional states as well. So there's still a lot of opportunity in Georgia.
Lindsay, what did you do before? I'm just curious. What did you do before you jumped into this full time on the investment side? Right? It sounded like you did corporate for just a little bit, but I'm curious
Just
what it was.
It was I was in management at Cintas, so we were uniform and facility services. So nothing to do with real estate.
What was your degree in?
Uh, Business management and public relations.
Okay, cool. You've learned a
Yep.
lot during this process. Crazy, funny story for those listening. Some people know this, but I recruited technical salespeople. That was the first business I started with my best friend, pretty much right out of college, right? We'd place like us, like right out of college into tech companies. But when the dot-com implosion happened, we had to pivot and find other industries because nobody was hiring. Like there was the tech implosion was brutal. In Cintas was one of those companies, and we placed people like you at Cintas back in the day,
Oh,
right?
really?
Yeah,
That's
yeah, it
what a
was
small
crazy.
world.
Small world. Like
It,
it was cool. And the story of Cintas is fascinating. It was like a guy with a rag. I remember like
yep.
like he would wash the rags for like gas stations or something like that, right?
In the Great
It's a
Depression, that's how he made money. Is he went and got all of these oil rags from people and washed them, would laundry them, and bring them back to him, and that's how he was able to make money. It's based started in Cincinnati, Ohio, and then it kind of grew from there until this huge. And they have done acquisitions. They do document
huge.
management now and uniform. I mean, everything like that. Their story is great, and it's a fantastic company to work for. Absolutely. I mean, I learned so much. I was there for about 4.5 years, and so it's just a fantastic company to ever be a part of. Unfortunately, I was just employed there in probably the worst economy that we've seen in 50 years. So it's just one of those things. It's not on Centos at all.
Yeah, no, no. It's you know, companies have to pivot.
Yeah,
All
absolutely.
companies have it. Like the reason why they're still alive and moved into other verticals is because they were pivoting as the economy was changing, as business is changing, as technology is evolving, right?
As you have to stay relevant and survive.
Yeah, yeah, yeah. And so that's why I was asking, right? I've seen like I've seen the evolution in our business as we've evolved, and I'm seeing the evolution of your business and your
Hmm.
market as you evolve, right? And let me tell you, as somebody that lives in the Washington D.C. metro area, when I hear like a premium, like we can't get a condo for 420,000 here, right? Like that might be 800 square feet, which is why knowing somebody like you is so valuable, right? For anybody listening, they're like, hey, there is a Sherpa and a guide in another market that's growing. Because that was my big lesson, right? Like we started off the story of like I went into a submarket and honestly, they did not do well in a submarket, but the
Right.
market was dying, right? If I had just done a little homework, I would have been like, oh, this has a negative 1% population growth. Like I should probably not invest here, right? um, everybody you want to be looking at where people are moving to and where the jobs are getting created and where affordability is happening. And it sounds like you found this like, this well, you're in it was in your backyard, but you found this niche and you're sniffing out the other areas, right? Where this is
Right,
now.
that match that are very similar to, because there are still a lot of markets in the Southeast that are very similar to Birmingham, and your barrier to entry is so low. In fact, when we first started, it's funny to always share this, but when we were first starting, we were having to fly investors out to Birmingham so they could come and see a property and know that we're not selling them like a cardboard box, that they were able to buy this house for $100,000. And of course, that was back in 2013, 14, 15. But that's what we were spending our money to fly people from California and all over the country to us so we could say, hey, look, like this is the neighborhood, this is the market, this is the property, and here are the numbers. It's already cash flowing, et cetera, et cetera. And so we've come definitely a long way from having to do that. But I mean, you're absolutely right. Those are the investors that we are catering to, or that they're just living in areas where it's really difficult to do it and make money.
Do you know the name Brett Tanner? Does that ring a bell to you at all?
I don't think so.
He's an investor. He's an agent investor like me, but he started buying in Birmingham like pretty early on. Pretty sure it's Birmingham. Positive, almost positive it's Birmingham. And he crushed it, right? He just built a portfolio of properties and right idea, right time. And it was more of a tip that he got from somebody. And he was just like, "Where are you buying?" And he was like, "Oh, I guess Birmingham must be a bit large car manufacturer. Is that right?" Is that and so there was like plants that were being built and he kind of caught wind of that early and then went in and started buying in those markets. I don't know whether he still owns there or not. I think he does. Um, but he's a pretty public figure, and I know that he's done like a lot in that market.
The auto manufacturing plants, like we have Mercedes, we have Honda, Toyota, Mazda. I mean, it's just it's huge. Alabama did a very good job at positioning itself to attract the auto manufacturing and all of their sub vendors as well. It's like, hey, just come here and bring jobs, and they're bringing like the high paying blue collar jobs. And you won't pay taxes for 30 years, I think was what was Mercedes' original plan when Alabama was recruiting them. So they did a really good job of positioning themselves as ideal for businesses to come. And that's really
That's
what
great.
you want.
With what's going on in the world of tariffs, right? Is that, I assume, attracting more dollars to you guys, right? Because you've got more of these manufacturing jobs that might be coming home and saying, okay, like we're not going to do this overseas. We're going to look at other markets. Have you experienced that at all or no?
Not really
Not
yet. You know, I think right now the affordability piece is the biggest concern with the implementation of tariffs. It's going to be a few years before we see manufacturer growth because of them. And because you know it's like just nothing is 100% assembled here. You know, we have a Mercedes plant, but it's still brought in from other places as well. So I
interesting.
think that the affordability piece, and again, it's something that you have to be cognizant of, and going back to what you said is pivoting, and that you have it, whenever affordability becomes a little bit more pinched, and you're dealing with rental properties, you have to have the mindset of that every tenant is about one life event away from eviction. And so when you're trying to do renewals and you're trying to push rents, you need to be cognizant of that, and that we've recently pivoted. We do 8% increases and have gotten them no problem over the last 5 years. We did a lot more than 8% in a couple of those years. And now it's like, hey, we're taking a step back. And so we're telling our investors like, hey, this is where we would typically do an 8%. This tenant has been paying on time. Maintenance has been extremely low. We recommend you do not do any kind of rent increases. So again, it's with the tariffs. I don't know that we've seen any kind of job increase yet with that.
Yeah, interesting. Okay, I'm gonna ask you some rapid fire questions, and then we'll figure out how people can get a hold of you next. But
Okay.
your average investor that buys with you, single property, what's the average number of properties they have with you?
It's 3.4. So on average,
Okay, okay, cool. And you said the rate of return, cash on cash, was it cash on cash or internal rate of return when you said
9
9 to 10%?
to 10%. Yeah.
Cash on cash.
Cash on cash.
Okay, cool. The average, just so I know, the average price of, I know you've got a difference between like new construction and renovation, but was new construction 165 and like I'm sorry, reno was like 165 and new construction was 325? Is that right?
So reno, yep, you're right on for about 165,000, and then new construction, our average right now is like 285.
Okay. And so what are the rents for the one at 165 and what are the rents for the new construction on average?
On average for the renovated properties, you're looking at about 1450 on average, and then on the renovated properties, you're, or I'm sorry, on the new construction properties, you're uh, it definitely varies based on where they are, but we're seeing anywhere from 18 to 2100.
It's great. That's great. Yeah, when I just think about like the imbalance, like the spread in our market, it's crazy, right?
I mean, it really is, and that's again, that's kind of what what makes Alabama and Georgia and Tennessee so attractive.
If people want to get a hold of you, but what's the best way?
So if anybody wants to learn more, like I said, we have a ton of information on our website, that's spartaninvest.com. You can fill out one of those forms and take a look at our inventory. You can get access to all of our market reports. And then we also have a podcast on the house with Spartan Invest. And it's primarily for really just education, and that there's a lot of episodes where it's like, hey, if you just want to know what our process is for managing an eviction, there's a couple of episodes where I walk you through exactly what that looks like, what your timeline might look like. It's really just in the weeds, and it's just more for an educational standpoint. So you can either check it out on our website or listen to us on onthehouse.com, or on not spartaninvest.com, on the house with Spartan Invest.
I love it. Lindsay, thank you so much for joining us on the Income Flip podcast. This has been awesome.
Thank you so much for having me. I appreciate it.
Sure thing.